In April of 1997, in a boardroom in Fond du Lac, Wisconsin, the directors of a 138-year-old company sat down to decide who they were going to lose to. A mining equipment giant from Milwaukee had them cornered, offering $19 a share and already in court to force the sale. And everyone at that table knew what happened to machine tool companies swallowed by conglomerates. Factories stripped, engineers scattered, the name printed on imported machinery until nobody remembered what it used to mean. The machines built in that town had bored the gun mounts of the battleships that won the Pacific and cut the landing gear of the bombers that flattened Berlin. When Washington called America the arsenal of democracy, this company was one of the arsenals the arsenal was built with. And the only way to save it was to sell it to the Germans. So how does that happen? How does a repair shop for sawmills, founded before the Civil War, end up building America's war machine only to wind up owned by Paris? This is Trade Archive, where we dig up the stories behind the machines that built the modern world. Hit the like button and subscribe, because this one goes deep. Fond du Lac, Wisconsin, 1859. The name is French for bottom of the lake, and that's exactly where the town sits, at the foot of Lake Winnebago, where the timber came down from the north woods and the wheat came up from the prairie. Sawmills lined the water, grist mills ground the grain, and every one of those mills ran on machinery that broke. A machinist named John Bonnell saw the opportunity. Machinery in 1859 did not come with a service department. When a sawmill's arbor seized or a grist mill's gearing stripped, the owner either fixed it himself or watched his business stand still while a replacement part came by wagon and canal boat from back east. Bonnell opened a machine shop to fix things locally. Broken shafts, worn bearings, stripped gears. Not glamorous work, but necessary work, and necessary work pays. Bonnell ran the shop for 6 years, and in 1866 he sold it to two brothers, George and Horace Trowbridge, who spotted the bottleneck he'd missed: cast iron. If you needed a new gear blank or a machine frame, the raw casting had to come from foundries hundreds of miles away. So the Trowbridges built their own gray iron foundry next to the machine shop, by the accounts that survive among the very first in Wisconsin, and renamed the operation the Novelty Iron Works. Now they controlled the whole chain: molten iron in one end, finished machinery out the other. For the mechanizing farms and mills of the Midwest, Novelty Iron Works became the place that could make you almost anything. The ownership then passed through hands the way small industrial firms did in the 19th century, through partnerships, estates, and handshakes. In 1874, the Trowbridges sold to three investors: A. E. Bosworth, Walter Bigelow, and a man whose name deserves a minute of your time: Colonel Charles H. DeGroat. DeGroat had come to Fond du Lac from New York as a 14-year-old in 1852. When the Civil War broke out, he raised his own company of local men, Company A of the 32nd Wisconsin, and marched them south as their captain. He made colonel in July 1864 in the middle of the Siege of Atlanta, went with Sherman on the march to the sea, and in March 1865 was brevetted a brigadier general. Then he came home and in 1874 did what Fond du Lac men did. He made machinery. For 2 decades, the firm even carried his name, DeGroat, Giddings and Lewis, and under him it grew into a builder of steam engines and complete mill installations, shipping equipment from Maine to Texas to Washington State and Canada. The rest of the shuffle went the way these things went. Bigelow died within 3 years. Bonnell sold his remaining stake to David Giddings, who passed it to a relative, George Giddings. And in 1895, when DeGroat's health failed, he sold out to George Giddings and an associate named O. F. Lewis. That year, the firm incorporated under the two names that would outlive everyone in the room: the Giddings and Lewis Manufacturing Company. Here's what's strange about that. If you go looking for the founders, you find almost nothing. Giddings and Lewis were not inventors or visionaries. They were investors in a small Wisconsin town who put their names on an ironworks. In 1895, Giddings and Lewis made sawmill machinery and engine lathes, and its foundry took whatever work the town needed, down to casting lampposts for the city of Fond du Lac. But the timber economy was dying underneath them. The white pine forests of northern Wisconsin were being cut out, and by the turn of the century the company was easing out of sawmill machinery altogether. Meanwhile, in Detroit, in Pittsburgh, in every city with a rail line, the age of steel and the automobile was arriving. And steel needed a completely different kind of machine. A dying market on one side, a new one being born on the other. What the company needed was money brave enough to make the jump, and in 1910 it arrived. The Rupping family took a controlling interest. William Rupping, a tanner from Essen, Germany, had landed in America in 1853 and built a Fond du Lac tannery. His son Fred grew into the Fred Rupping Leather Company, one of the leading leather producers in the Midwest, and, at its peak, one of the town's largest employers. Now the tanning fortune bought into the ironworks, and F.J. Rupping took the president's chair. They were exactly the kind of owners a company in transition needs: local, wealthy, patient, in it for decades rather than quarters. Money like that changes what a company can attempt. The jump came in two stages, and the first was a war. When the First World War broke out, the British government came to Fond du Lac with contracts for shell lathes, the machines that turned raw steel into artillery casings, and when America entered, Washington followed with contracts of its own. The payroll climbed toward 300, and somewhere in those war years, the company built its first horizontal boring, drilling, and milling machines. The product that would define the next century entered the catalog through the door marked War. Then came Stage 2. In 1921, F.J. Rupping reorganized the firm as the Giddings and Lewis Machine Tool Company, put the woodworking era behind it, and bet the company's future on one category of machine: the horizontal boring mill. In a town built on lumber, they bet that the future was iron. And to run that bet, Rupping hired a general manager named H.B. Kraut. Remember him. For most of the next 4 decades, Kraut is the man at the wheel. If you have never stood next to one, a horizontal boring mill is what you build when the part is too big to spin. The workpiece, an engine block, a pump housing, a locomotive frame, gets clamped down and does not move. A horizontal spindle, a rotating steel bar carrying a cutting tool, advances into the part and bores holes perfectly round and perfectly sized through iron that might weigh more than a house. And through the 1920s, under Kraut's modernization program, Giddings and Lewis got very, very good at it. The boring mill line grew to spindles 8 inches across, on machines ranging from 10,000 pounds to 275,000. By the late 20s, the Rupping family had stepped back, and Kraut held the chairman's seat too. And in a move that tells you how clear-eyed he was, he shut down the company's own foundry, the descendant of the Trowbridge brothers' Iron Works, because it was simply cheaper to buy castings from specialists. Then came the Depression. The company's own history claims the 1929 crash had little effect on it. Take that with the grain of salt every corporate history deserves. But this much is documented. Machine tools are the first purchase every company cancels when times turn hard, and builders were starving coast to coast in the early 30s. And in 1934, in the middle of that wreckage, Giddings and Lewis went public with its first stock offering. Not to survive, but to finish building out its machine shop and buy new equipment. In the pit of the Great Depression, the company from Fond du Lac was raising money to grow. In 1940, more than a year before Pearl Harbor, the government was already asking Giddings and Lewis to expand, and the company tore down its aging buildings and replaced them. Then, Japan bombed Pearl Harbor, and the rest of the country discovered the problem that almost nobody outside heavy industry understood. You cannot fight an industrial war without machine tools, and machine tools were the one thing America could not improvise. A shipyard can be built in months. A horizontal boring mill big enough to machine a battleship gun mount takes a company that has spent 2 decades learning how. In 1941, there were only a handful of those companies on Earth, and one of them sat at the bottom of Lake Winnebago. Think about what the arsenal of democracy actually required. A Sherman tank turret ring has to be machined round, or the turret binds. A naval gun mount has to be bored true, or the gun doesn't point where the fire control says it points. Bomber landing gear, submarine components, artillery, everyone passed through heavy boring and turning machines somewhere in the chain. And the government didn't just send contracts to Fond du Lac. It built there. A War Department emergency plant on 7 acres beside the works, 150,000 square feet, described at the time as one of the most modern machine tool plants in the country. Giddings and Lewis ran around the clock, shipping the mother machines to defense plants nationwide. Those workers never saw combat. But every shell that landed on target had, somewhere far upstream, a Fond du Lac machine in its ancestry. The war ended. The machines didn't stop. Flush with wartime earnings and rising demand from the airlines, the automakers, and the farm equipment giants, Giddings and Lewis started buying. In 1945, they bought the Davis Boring Tool Company of St. Louis, so now they made the machine and the teeth it cut with. A few years later, they took over the Cincinnati Planer Company, moved it to Fond du Lac, and ran it as the Hypro division. In 1955, they went bigger still, acquiring the Cincinnati Bickford Tool Company, a radial drill builder dating to 1874, and the Kaukauna Machine Corporation of Kaukauna, Wisconsin. By 1957, Giddings and Lewis ran 4 divisions across nearly 1 million square feet, and a year later, foundries came back into the family through Kaukauna, pouring gray iron castings up to 70,000 pounds. In 1959, the company crossed the Atlantic, buying Douglas Fraser and Sons of Arbroath, Scotland, its first works overseas. If Giddings and Lewis ever had a golden age, this is it. Nearly 3 decades, most with Kraut at the wheel. Not a stock price, a state of being. 4 divisions, 1 million square feet, its own cutting tools, its own foundries, a works in Scotland, a payroll that anchored an entire town, and a product line the free world could not do without. But the most important thing the company did in the 1950s didn't involve buying anything. It involved a problem the United States Air Force couldn't solve with human hands. Jet aircraft were changing the geometry of manufacturing. A propeller-era part could be machined by a skilled man reading a blueprint and turning hand wheels. A jet fighter wing spar, or a turbine blade, is a mathematically defined curve, a surface that exists as an equation before it exists as metal. No machinist, however skilled, can crank hand wheels through a differential equation. So the Air Force funded research at MIT to create numerical control, machines commanded not by hands, but by coded instructions. Most machine tool companies looked at numerical control and saw an expensive laboratory toy. Giddings and Lewis saw the future of its entire industry and became one of the first builders in the world to put it on real iron. In the mid-1950s, the company introduced the numericord, one of the earliest commercial numerical control systems, driving its big machines from coated tape. That lineage later evolved into the company's own Numeripath 8000 controls, built for a brutally specific job, making a 50-ton machine tool hold tolerances measured in 10,000ths of an inch. It looked unstoppable. It wasn't. In 1966, Giddings and Lewis bought the Gisholt Machine Company of Madison, boosting capacity by 1/3 and pushing into aircraft profilers, the machines that carved structural parts for the 747, the DC-10, and the supersonic transport program. By the end of the 1960s, more than 4,300 people drew a Giddings and Lewis paycheck. 4,300 jobs, 4 divisions, the biggest airliners in history taking shape on Fond du Lac machines. That is the high watermark. Because here is the curse over every machine tool company that ever existed. Nobody buys machine tools until they are confident, and confidence is the first thing a recession kills. It is the most cyclical industry in America. First into every downturn, last out of every recovery. In 1970, with capital spending frozen across the economy, sales collapsed to $95 million, and the company posted a net loss of $3.3 million, the worst year in its history to that point. Gisholt, the prize of 1966, was sold off, and the workforce was cut by more than half to around 1,900. 2,400 jobs gone, and the bleeding was about to get personal. On October 1, 1975, the unionized workers of Giddings and Lewis walked off the job. Generations of the same families in Fond du Lac had poured iron and run boring mills in those buildings. Sons followed fathers through the gates. When those workers set up picket lines in the autumn of 1975, they believed what strikers in company towns always had, that the company could not run without them. Management decided to test that belief. They hired 323 permanent replacement workers and sent them through the picket lines. This is where this story turns cruel, because under American labor law, a company facing an economic strike is allowed to permanently replace the strikers. The men and women on the picket line were not just risking missed paychecks. They were watching strangers take their jobs in their town, at their machines, with the law's blessing. The strike ground on for 14 months. Neighbors stopped speaking. Families split between those who held the line and those who crossed it. And on November 20, 1976, it ended with the union out of road and the strikers offering to come back. The company said, "Fine, get in line." The replacements kept their jobs. The returning strikers went onto a preferential recall list, called back one at a time over years, only as positions opened. The National Labor Relations Board went after the company, arguing the list was being used to break the union. The fight climbed the federal courts to the 7th Circuit, and in 1982, in Giddings and Lewis versus the NLRB, the court sided with the company. The company had beaten the union, but it was not going to beat the 1980s. Cheap, excellent machine tools were pouring in from Japan and Germany, and American builders were dying in rows, legendary names that had equipped the arsenal of democracy. Bridgeport, Monarch, Warner and Swayze. Whole categories of American industrial capability simply ceased to exist. In 1982, the first raider came. AMCA International, a Canadian conglomerate, launched an unsolicited tender offer of $25 a share, roughly $260 million, and it stuck. Giddings and Lewis lost its independence for the first time and spent the decade as a division inside someone else's portfolio while the Rust Belt hollowed out around it. But inside that conglomerate, the company was being rebuilt for a comeback. In 1987, AMCA installed a new president, William Fife, a machine tool man who had run Kearney and Trecker of Milwaukee. In 1989, AMCA spun Giddings and Lewis back out as an independent public company with Fife as chairman and chief executive officer, and he came out at a sprint. Within 8 months, he had paid off the company's entire $16 million debt. From the year he arrived through 1991, sales nearly tripled, from $125 million to $327 million. While the rest of the American machine tool industry was dying, Fortune and Forbes were writing up the miracle in Fond du Lac. Fife framed it bluntly. The Japanese came in the early 1980s and wiped out the American machine tool industry. His answer was to get big enough to fight back. So Fife went hunting. His prey was bigger than his own company. The Cross and Trecker Corporation was a fusion of two giants, The Cross Company, the Detroit builder whose transfer lines had automated the American auto industry, and Kearney and Trecker of Milwaukee, which owned one of the most important pedigrees in manufacturing. Founded in 1898, Kearney and Trecker built the Milwaukee milling machines that filled American factories, and in the late 1950s, its engineers created the Milwaukee Matic II, recognized as the world's first commercially offered machining center, the first machine that could automatically change its own cutting tools. Every machining center on Earth today descends from that machine. By 1991, Cross and Trecker was wounded and losing money, a giant with $550 million a year in sales, the third largest builder in America, stumbling. Giddings and Lewis, the fifth largest, swallowed it in a stock swap, no mountain of debt, just shares, and William Fife now owned the company he used to run. The combined operation, at more than $600 million in annual sales, leapfrogged Litton Industries and Cincinnati Millicron to become the largest machine tool builder in America. The sawmill repair shop from Fond du Lac had absorbed the DNA of the modern machining center and stood, for a moment, at the top of its industry. From the outside, it looked like the great American machine tool comeback. Inside, the board and its chief executive were headed for a collision. In April 1993, Fife abruptly resigned. The company called it a disagreement with the board over his financial decision-making, and the full story has never been told publicly. The board handed the company to an outsider, Joseph Coppola, a mechanical engineer with 17 years at General Electric and a rise through Cooper Industries behind him. And it was on Coppola's watch, in 1995, that Giddings and Lewis made its last great purchase, roughly $180 million for a company that could not have been more different from itself. Fatal Engineering of Chatsworth, California. Fatal was a family operation built by the DeCossens, machinists who had figured out how to make a vertical machining center simple, cheap, and tough. Their VMC 4020, running the company's own CNC 88 control, became by many accounts the best-selling American vertical machining center ever built, the machine that put CNC within reach of tens of thousands of small job shops. Giddings and Lewis sold million-dollar boring mills to aerospace primes. Fatal sold workhorses to a guy with a garage and a dream. The same company now covered American machining top to bottom. And here is the strange part. The sales kept growing. $619 million in 1994, $730 in 1995, $763 by 1996. But Wall Street had stopped believing. Profits wobbled, the Cross and Trecker integration dragged, Coppola retired, and the corner office passed to its third occupant in 4 years, Marvin Iles. By the spring of 1997, the stock sat at $13.62 a share. And on the market, a company with famous assets and a going-nowhere share price has a name: Target. Which brings us back to that boardroom in April 1997. The raider was Harnisch-Fager Industries, a Milwaukee heavyweight that built mining shovels and paper machinery, a rival from 90 minutes down the road, which somehow made it worse. Harnisch-Fager put $19 a share on the table, all cash, a 40% premium over the trading price, a transaction it valued at roughly $747 million. And it went to court to pry the company open. Iles and his board dug in, and their bankers went looking for the only thing that stops a hostile bid: a bigger, friendlier check. They found one in Dusseldorf. Thyssen, the German steel and engineering colossus, $26 billion a year in revenue, 113,000 employees, came over the top in June with a friendly all-cash offer of $21 a share, about $675 million for the equity. The board approved it unanimously. Harnisch-Fager walked away. Fond du Lac kept its factory, its jobs, its engineering. And the irony did not require a documentary narrator to point out. The company whose boring mills armed the fleets and air forces that defeated Germany was saved from Milwaukee by Germans. The story after 1997 is the story of modern globalization, told through one Wisconsin campus. Thyssen merged with Krupp, and Giddings and Lewis became part of ThyssenKrupp's production systems group. Then, in 2005, the chessboard shifted again. ThyssenKrupp's machine tool assets were bundled with other storied American names, Cincinnati's machine tool lines, XLO, Crosshuller, Fadal, into a new group called MAG Industrial Automation Systems. Under MAG, the moves got colder. Fadal, the beloved job shop brand, was shut down as a manufacturing operation in 2008. But the name refused to die, and in 2014, a Michigan manufacturer revived it, building and supporting machines for its enormous installed base again. Tens of thousands of Fadals were still running in American shops decades after purchase. Machines that outlive their own manufacturer are the highest compliment the industry pays. And in 2013, the wheel turned one more time. The Paris-based engineering group Fives acquired MAG's American operations, and the company became what it is today. Fives Giddings and Lewis, headquartered in the same town where John Bonnell hung out his sign in 1859. The human cost of surviving all of this is written in one number. In the 1990s, more than 1,000 people worked at Giddings and Lewis in Fond du Lac. By the time Fives arrived in 2013, it was roughly 260. Survival is real. So is what it costs. So what do those 200 or so people actually build that the world still cannot get anywhere else? They build the biggest, most precise metal cutting machines in the Western Hemisphere. And the way these machines are made is its own story, because you cannot buy precision at this scale. You have to grow it. A machine tool is only as good as its bones, and the bones are massive castings, beds, columns, tables, poured from gray iron, the same material the Trowbridge brothers were pouring in the 1860s, because nothing better at swallowing vibration has ever been found. But a fresh casting is a liar. Locked inside it are stresses from the pour, and if you machine it flat today, they will creep and warp it out of flat over the months to come. So the castings are stress-relieved and aged, historically left sitting out through the seasons until the iron settles into the shape it means to keep, flat and true to within fractions of 1,000th of an inch over spans longer than a city bus. But the crown jewel of modern Giddings and Lewis engineering is the part you cannot see. The machine floats. On a conventional machine, moving elements ride metal on metal, and under a 50-ton workpiece that contact becomes the enemy. Friction generates heat, heat becomes expansion, expansion becomes error, and every hour of cutting wears the precision away. G and L's answer is hydrostatics. Pressurized oil is pumped into pockets between the table and its base, and the fluid pressure lifts the entire assembly, table, fixture, and a workpiece, heavier than a loaded semi, onto a film of oil thinner than a human hair. No metal touches metal. A rotary table carrying 50 tons can index with sub-micron smoothness, and because nothing rubs, nothing wears. The machine is, in a meaningful sense, immortal at its core. That's what kept Fond du Lac alive when Bridgeport and Monarch died. You can offshore a commodity milling machine. You cannot easily offshore a floating 50-ton table, the foundry knowledge behind its castings, and the hands that fit it. Hands that in this town learned from hands that learned from hands going back before the light bulb. Honesty requires one more chapter, and it is a dark one. The same heavy industry that built all of this used the materials of its era, and one of them was asbestos, in the high-heat environments of foundry work and in older machine components. Today, Fives Giddings and Lewis appears as a defendant in asbestos injury lawsuits, including cases filed as recently as 2024 by former workers alleging that exposure connected to old machinery left them with asbestosis and mesothelioma. The machines that armed democracy carried a hidden cost, and some of the men who ran them paid it decades later, one breath at a time. Which makes what's happening right now all the more striking. In April 2026, Fives Giddings and Lewis announced a wave of investment in the Fond du Lac campus that would have seemed unthinkable during the Rust Belt years. A universal grinding machine, capable of handling cylindrical parts nearly 20 feet long, built by sister company Fives Landis, is arriving late this year. A 5-axis gantry machine from sister company Line Machines in Quebec is already installed, and here is the detail that tells you the scale. The foundation alone required 400 yards of concrete and 200,000 pounds of steel rebar. They did not install a machine. They built geology for it to stand on. Old office buildings on Johnson and Doty streets are coming down for green space, as a 19th century campus reshapes itself for the 21st. Fives says the company's machinery serves industries across some 70 countries. Aircraft wing spars carved from solid titanium, wind turbine housings, nuclear components, naval and defense work that does not get press releases. The customers change. The job has not. When something is too big, too heavy, and too precise for anyone else, it comes to the bottom of the lake. John Bonnell fixed sawmills. The Trowbridges poured iron. Giddings and Lewis signed the incorporation papers. And then the company they left behind did what almost no American machine tool builder managed. It survived everything. The death of the timber economy, which it outran by reinventing itself in metal. The Depression, which it went public in the middle of. It armed the Second World War, bet on numerical control when its competitors laughed, and survived a strike that broke its hometown's heart, a legal war that reached the federal appeals courts, and the import invasion that killed Bridgeport, Monarch, and Warner and Swazi. It swallowed Kearney and Trecker, the inventors of the machining center, and Fadal, the company that gave CNC to the little guy. It survived a hostile raid by selling itself to the country its machines once fought, then survived that owner, and the next one, and the one after that. Count the flags that have flown over this company. American, Canadian, American again, German, American a third time, inside a portfolio, now French. And through all of it, the machines never stopped being built in the same town, in some cases by the third and fourth generation of the same families, on ground the company has occupied since before Abraham Lincoln was president. Ford has Henry, Edison had Edison. Giddings and Lewis has no legend at the center, no famous face. What it has instead is 167 unbroken years of iron poured, ways scraped, and tolerances held by people whose names never made the newspapers in a town most Americans couldn't find on a map. The next time you fly, drive past a wind farm, or watch a warship leave port, understand this. Somewhere upstream of that machine is a bigger machine, and somewhere upstream of that one, there's a decent chance you'll find a table floating on a film of oil in Fond du Lac, Wisconsin. Still cutting, still true, still there. If you made it this far, you're our kind of viewer. Subscribe to Trade Archive, and we'll see you in the next one.